Raymond Kowalski walked into the assessment center, carrying a canvas lunch bag in one hand and his daughter's hand in the other, and the room full of candidates in pressed shirts and tactical gear took exactly 3 seconds to notice him before someone laughed. The man who laughed was Brendan Worth, seated near the front in a charcoal blazer that fit the way expensive things fit, and he said it at the kind of volume that assumes everyone in the room agrees with you. Did somebody get lost on the way to the school drop-off? A few people smiled, not all of them, but enough. Raymond did not look at Brendan Worth. He scanned the room once, left to right, noted the 2 exits and the camera mounted slightly off angle above the second door, and then walked Claire to the far side of the room where a stretch of wall gave him a clear sightline to both. He sat on the floor. He unzipped the lunch bag and found the small notebook and the 3 colored markers he had packed beside the sandwich and the apple slices. He handed Claire the notebook. She opened it to the first blank page with the careful attention of someone who had been trusted with something. 3 hours later, the man everyone in that room had assumed would win was sitting against the far wall, with his wrist at an angle that made continuing inadvisable. And Raymond Kowalski was standing in the center of the mat with his hands loose at his sides, breathing the same as he had been breathing before it started. Nobody laughed after that. They had seen a middle-aged electrician who brought his kid to a job interview. They had not seen what 4 years of quiet and a decade before that had made him. The morning had started at 5:15, the way Raymond's mornings always started, without an alarm, the body simply deciding it was done with sleep and moving on. He lay still for a moment in the dark, listening to the apartment. Claire's room was quiet. The street below held the specific hush of a city that had not yet committed to being awake. He got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window while it brewed. The refrigerator had a note on it. Claire had put it there herself 2 weeks ago, printed in the careful block letters of a 9-year-old who took handwriting seriously. Dad's big day, with 3 exclamation points and a drawing of a man in what appeared to be a cape, though when he had asked about it, she had said it was a jacket with good posture. He smiled at that now, alone in the kitchen, the way a person smiles when no one is watching. The refrigerator itself held a half-gallon of milk, some leftover rice from Wednesday, 2 eggs, and a block of cheddar close to the end. He had budgeted carefully this month. The assessment was today. If it went well, the math changed. If it didn't, he'd run the same math again with what was left and find a way through it, the way he always did. Raymond Kowalski was 47 years old. He had spent 11 years working for a federal contractor whose name did not appear on his public resume and whose work involved infrastructure systems not discussed in rooms without clearance requirements. He had left that work 4 years ago, 6 weeks after Claire's mother, Denise, died when a driver ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Claire had been 5. Raymond had been the only one left. He had not intended to stay out of the field for 4 years. The first year was survival, the raw mechanical work of keeping a small child, fed and present, and not destroyed by something she was too young to fully understand. The second year was adjustment, finding schools and routines, and a pediatrician who didn't make Claire feel like a chart. The third year was contracting work, electrical repair and systems consulting, enough to stay current and pay the bills, not enough for what was coming. The fourth year was now. And what was coming was the conversation with Dr. Reyes, who had delivered the scoliosis update with the kind of measured directness good doctors use when they want you to understand a situation without falling apart in the office. Claire's curve had progressed. Conservative management was no longer the recommended path. The surgery itself was not urgent in terms of weeks, but it was urgent in terms of the kind of insurance Raymond did not currently have. He had found the Harman Technologies posting on a Thursday night after Claire was asleep. Director of Critical Infrastructure Security, full benefits package effective date of hire. He had read the benefits section twice. He had applied the same night. He made oatmeal and cut the apple into slices the way Claire liked them, thin with the peel on because she said the peel was the best part. He set the bowl on her side of the table and folded a paper towel beside the spoon and went to knock on her door at 6:45. She was already half awake, sitting up with her hair going in 3 directions and a stuffed elephant named Gordon pressed against her chest. Gordon was gray and worn to a softness that was almost velvet. One of his button eyes had been replaced with a slightly larger one from a different button set, which gave him an expression of mild, permanent astonishment. Denise had bought Gordon at a hospital gift shop the afternoon Claire was born, as a joke, she'd said, because it was the only thing left in the store that wasn't a balloon. Claire had slept with him every night for 9 years. Morning, Bug. Morning. She squinted at him. Are you nervous? No. She looked at him the way 9-year-olds look at adults when they suspect they're not telling the complete truth. A little? Maybe a little, he said. Eat your oatmeal. She came to the table and ate with the focused efficiency of someone who had somewhere to be. Halfway through, she looked up. What's the job again? Security director. Making sure a company's systems are safe. Safe from what? People who want to get in where they're not supposed to be. She considered this, apple slice in hand. You're good at that. What makes you say so? You always know when I'm up past bedtime, she said, even when I'm quiet. He did not say anything to that. He turned back to the dishes. The babysitter, a retired nurse 2 streets over named Mrs. Fowler, called at 7:20 with a cough she was apologizing for before she finished the sentence. Her grandson was visiting and had come down with something. Just precautionary, she said. She was sorry. Raymond stood in the kitchen, holding the phone after the call ended. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at Claire, who was watching him from the table, with the quiet attention of a child who has learned to read the pause between a phone call and what comes next. Change of plan, he said. You're coming with me. She was already standing up. Can I bring Gordon? Yes. She went to get her backpack. He found the small sketchbook and the set of markers in the drawer by the desk, the ones Claire used for projects, and tucked them into the lunch bag beside a sandwich and the apple slices he'd meant to eat himself. He zipped the bag and helped Claire into her jacket and tied the lace on her left shoe, which she could do herself, but had a habit of rushing and leaving loose. She stood patiently, with one hand on his shoulder while he did it. Are you going to win? She asked. He pulled the laces snug and looked up at her. I'm going to do the work and see what happens. She nodded. That was an acceptable answer. She picked up Gordon and they went out the door. Harman Technologies occupied the top 9 floors of a building on the north side of the city, glass and steel. The kind of building that wanted you to feel certain things on walking in. Raymond felt the cool air of the lobby and the particular quality of a space where money was not an afterthought, and noted the camera positions at the security desk and the gap in coverage near the east corridor, and said nothing about any of it. The assessment waiting room was off the main lobby, long and well lit, with chairs arranged in a way that assumed everyone sitting in them would be wearing a suit. Most of the candidates were. There were 15 of them when Raymond and Claire came through the door. Tactical builds, careful posture, the specific stillness of people trained to assess rooms. They assessed this one. The silence that followed was approximately 3 seconds. Then Brendan Worth made his comment, and a few people laughed, and Raymond walked Claire to the wall and sat on the floor. A young man from the front desk came over with the expression of someone given an uncomfortable task. He explained politely that the space was not designed for children. Raymond looked at him without particular emotion. If the person running this assessment wants to ask me to leave, he said, I'd prefer they do that directly. I'll wait until then. The young man left. Claire, who had heard all of this, did not look up from her sketchbook. She was already working on something in green marker. In the second chair from the end, a man named Derek Ashe watched Raymond settle against the wall and then returned his eyes to the front of the room. Derek was 6 feet and 210 pounds, 12 years of Secret Service, and a record of controlled, sparring evaluations that had not included a loss in 18 months. He had clocked Raymond in the first 2 seconds and filed him under no competitive relevance. He was not an arrogant man. He was simply accurate, based on available information. The available information was incomplete. On the floor above the waiting room, behind a panel of one-way glass, Judith Harmon stood with her arms folded and watched. She was 51 and had built Harmon Technologies from a regional network security firm into a company valued at $1.7 billion over 22 years, and she had done it by being better than most people at reading what was actually in front of her rather than what she expected to see. She had silver-streaked hair she'd stopped apologizing for at 43, and a directness of manner the trades called formidable, and she called efficient. Preston Mallory stood behind her with a tablet and the easy posture of a man who had spent 8 years making himself indispensable and had stopped noticing the effort required to maintain it. He was her CFO. He was also, though neither of them knew this yet, the reason she had found a photograph of herself in her own parking garage 3 days ago, with the words, "You should have sold," written across the back in red pen. "Walk me through the candidate pool," she said. He did. Derek Ashe first, as expected, exemplary background recommended for the short list. 4 others he flagged for technical aptitude. He did not mention Raymond Kowalski at all. Judith was looking at the corner of the room, at the man on the floor with the child who was now holding up her sketchbook to show him something. The man nodded at whatever was in the drawing. The child went back to work. "The man in the corner," Judith said. "Pull his file." Preston scrolled. Raymond Kowalski, 47, 3 years of independent electrical contracting. Prior to that, listed as federal contractor, no specifics. Some gaps in the record that may be data entry. "Maybe," she said. "You want to cut him?" "No, leave him in." She did not explain why. She rarely explained her reasoning in the moment. Explanation was for after the thing was decided. The first evaluation was written. A scenario printed on a single sheet. A server facility issuing a targeted intrusion attempt, social engineering component confirmed, 3 points of simultaneous access. The primary response team 22 minutes out. Describe your immediate action sequence and your reasoning. The room went quiet. Raymond read the sheet once and then wrote. He wrote his initial sequence in the first 3 minutes. He spent the remaining time adding a diagram in the margin. Access point relationships. 2 alternative containment approaches depending on the building's HVAC configuration. A note about which of the 3 intrusion points was likely the decoy and why. He noted that the scenario omitted one detail that mattered. Whether the facility had a separate analog backup to its alert system, which changed the recommended sequence at step 4. The assessor, a retired NSA systems analyst named Carver, moved through the papers at the end. He stopped at Raymond's. He read it twice, then placed it face down on the stack differently from the others, with a particular care that was not a grade but was not neutral either. He moved on without comment. Raymond noticed. He did not react. Claire, during the written evaluation, had been taken to a small side room by a young woman from the administrative staff named Priya Desai, who had the calm competence of someone who had decided very early that no situation was worth being rattled by. Priya had offered the side room with a juice box and no particular ceremony, and Claire had accepted and spread her sketchbook on the low table and gotten to work. After a few minutes, she looked up at Priya. "Is my dad going to get this job?" Priya thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet. It depends on how the rest of the day goes." Claire turned back to her drawing. "He's been the best at every job he's ever had," she said. Not a boast, a statement of observed fact, the way a person reports weather. Priya looked at the drawing. It was a detailed sketch of the lobby downstairs, including the camera positions, reproduced from memory, with an accuracy that took a moment to fully register. Did he teach you to notice things like that? He says it's just paying attention, Claire said. He says most people forget to. The physical assessment ran in the building's lower level, a converted space with mats and equipment and a reaction speed console mounted to one wall. A panel of randomized lights, requiring the user to strike the corresponding pad within a set interval. Raymond placed 5th overall in the composite. Brendan Worth placed 3rd. Derek Ashe placed 1st, and was breathing easily when it was over. The reaction console ran each candidate in sequence. Derek Ashe logged 0.21 seconds, which the technician noted approvingly. Brendan Worth logged 0.23. When Raymond's turn came, the panel cycled and Raymond moved, and the technician looked at the number on the board, then looked at it again. 0.17 seconds. He cleared the board and ran it again. 0.17. The technician wrote it down. He did not say it out loud. He looked at his clipboard for a moment longer than the notation required. Across the room, Derek Ashe had watched the sequence. He did not speak, but his assessment of Raymond Kowalski, the one filed under no competitive relevance, underwent a quiet revision. Brendan Worth had also seen it. He looked at Raymond with an expression that was not quite the one he'd come in with. The combat evaluation was last. The rules were the same as they always were in assessments like this: control not damage, contain and neutralize, points for technique, economy, time to resolution. Derek Ashe served as the anchor. He went through 5 challengers. The first lasted 31 seconds. The second made it to 40 before Derek walked him down with the patient efficiency of someone filing paperwork. The third attempted something ambitious with his footwork that Derek neutralized in under 4 seconds. The fourth and fifth were variations on the same story. Nobody got up fast, but nobody was hurt. That was the discipline of it, and Derek applied it. Cleanly. Brendan Worth went 6th. He was genuinely good. His guard was tight, his transition smooth, and he understood angles in a way that suggested real training and not just a gym membership. He lasted 27 seconds, respectable, before Derek found the gap in his left side and took him to the mat with controlled inevitability. Brendan got up. He straightened his blazer. He looked around the room with the expression of a man doing arithmetic on his ego. His eyes found Raymond in the corner, sitting against the wall with his water bottle, watching. "Hey," Brendan said, with the weight of someone who knows the room is listening. "Electrician, you're up. Or do you need to check on your kid first?" A few people looked away. Fewer laughed than had laughed in the morning. Raymond set down the water bottle. He stood. He walked to the mat and removed his watch, a digital watch with a rubber band, the kind sold in hardware stores for $19, and set it on the edge of the mat, with the same care he would use for something worth keeping. Then he stood in the center, hands at his sides, and looked at Derek Ashe. Derek approached. He was a professional, and he came in the way professionals do, reading for resistance before committing to anything. He reached for a collar position, the standard entry that let him feel what he was working with before he decided what to do about it. What he found was nothing. Not nothing in the sense of absence. Nothing in the sense that the shoulder he was reaching for was no longer where it had been when he reached for it. It had moved in a direction shoulders do not usually move. Not a rotation, not a flinch. Something earlier than that. A redistribution of weight so complete that Derek's entry landed on empty space, while the man it was meant to contact had simply become elsewhere. His trailing arm, the one he used for leverage, was caught at the elbow from an angle that did not appear in Derek's muscle memory. The pressure applied was not painful. It communicated one thing with total clarity. Forward was no longer an option. Derek's training told him to drive his weight low and use his size. It was good training, he did it. Raymond let him. Specifically, Raymond permitted Derek's considerable momentum to carry him past Raymond's center of gravity. An insignificant thing to allow, with enormous consequences. A man of Derek's size and training, once committed to a direction with full weight behind it, is briefly a projectile. When he finds no resistance where he expected it, the math changes in ways that cannot be quickly corrected. Raymond's right foot placed itself precisely where Derek was going to be. Not a sweep, a placement. Derek arrived at the mat in a controlled line, guided down rather than thrown down, with Raymond's knee between his shoulder blades and his wrist held at an angle that described, without language, that the available actions had narrowed to 1. 7 seconds from first contact. The room was silent in a way rooms are rarely silent. Derek Ashe lay on the mat and breathed. He was a man who had been in enough real situations to know the difference between someone who had learned a system and someone who had lived inside one. What had just been done to him was not technique in the standard meaning of the word. He turned his head. "Devru," he said quietly, "a guess. Not quite right, but close enough that the question was really a statement." Raymond said nothing. He released Derek's wrist and stood and offered his hand. Derek looked at the hand. He took it. In the hallway, visible through the narrow window of the gym door, Priya Desai stood with Claire beside her. Claire was on her toes to see through the glass. She had heard the silence fall through the door. The specific quality of quiet that meant something significant had finished. She could see her father standing in the center of the mat, and all the other men still, and watching him. "He didn't lose," she said. Priya was looking through the glass over Claire's head. "No, he didn't." Claire lowered herself from her toes and held Gordon up by one ear and regarded him. "I told you," she said to the elephant. Gordon's mismatched eyes offered no comment. On the 8th floor, Judith Harmon sat at her desk, with a file that was not the file Preston had pulled. The company's legal and compliance team ran federal background queries on any candidate whose assessment numbers fell outside normal parameters. Raymond Kowalski's reaction time had triggered the query automatically. The query had returned a clearance flag. Judith had signed the secondary request herself, 2 hours earlier, and it had come back 15 minutes before she'd expected it. Raymond Kowalski, Senior Technical Specialist, Classified Infrastructure Division, federal contractor under a program whose operational title was not included in the document. 11 years of service. Deployments to environments listed by category but not by name. A commendation attached to an incident summarized in 4 words. Critical infrastructure protection, classified. The rest was redacted behind an authorization level she did not have. The record of separation said voluntary, personal circumstances, sole caregiver, minor dependent. The date of separation was 8 weeks after the date, on a second document Judith had not requested, but which the query had returned automatically due to record linkage. A death certificate. Denise Kowalski, age 41, blunt force trauma, motor vehicle incident, a Tuesday afternoon in March. Judith set the file on her desk and looked at the window for a moment. The city outside was doing what cities do in the afternoon. Priya appeared in the doorway. "He's in the corridor if you want to speak with him." "Claire's asleep on the bench." Judith stood and walked to the door. Raymond was standing outside the bench where Claire lay asleep on her side, Gordon rising and falling against her chest. He was not sitting. He stood at an angle to the wall that gave him a clear sight line in both directions, without appearing to look, and his attention moved through the corridor in a slow automatic arc that did not stop until it found Judith in the doorway. He turned. She looked at him. "Why did you apply for this position?" "Health coverage," he said. "My daughter needs a procedure. Family coverage gets us there." She was quiet for a moment. Then a tone cut through the floor. Not the fire alert, different. A low double tone that sounded twice and stopped. Priya appeared at the end of the corridor, moving fast. A package was delivered to this floor. It didn't clear the lobby checkpoint. She looked at her tablet. There's a gap in the camera log for the service elevator. 11 minutes. Raymond was already between Judith and the corridor. He had moved before Priya finished the sentence, not urgently, not visibly rushed, simply positioned. Interior wall, he said to Judith. Away from the windows. He looked at Priya. Lock the service elevator from the basement panel. Don't send security up. Tell them to hold position below and wait for my call. Priya had her phone out. She moved. Raymond walked to the package where it sat on the floor near the elevator junction. He did not touch it. He circled it slowly and looked at it from 3 angles, then crouched and read it with his hands flat 6 inches above the surface, the way a person reads Braille in the dark. He stood, not a device. He looked at Judith. Open it? She nodded. Inside the padded envelope was a photograph. Judith, taken 3 days ago, leaving the building through the parking structure on level 2. The shot was taken from a position that should have been inside the camera perimeter. The camera on level 2's eastern column was mounted to cover that exact position, which meant the camera was not covering it anymore. Underneath the photograph was a card, plain white, 6 words printed in the center in a plain font. The next offer won't be refused. Judith looked at the card for a long moment. It was the second warning in 3 days, and this one had come from inside the building. Preston Mallory arrived from the stairwell end of the corridor. His jacket was buttoned. His expression was calibrated at exactly the frequency of concerned colleague, present enough to register, controlled enough to seem professional. Judith. I just heard. He moved toward her with the smooth directness of a man who had prepared his blocking in advance. I want to go through the building's security log personally. I already told the lobby team to tighten the entry protocol yesterday. I should have followed through immediately. Raymond looked at Preston once. It was a brief look and a flat look, the kind that takes an inventory without declaring its findings. Then he turned back to the envelope. Judith noticed the look. She filed it, the way she filed most things she did not yet have proof for. The building security team arrived. Statements were taken. The photograph and card were logged. Judith declined to leave the floor until her 4:30 call was complete, and Derek Ashe was assigned as interim protective presence. Raymond was thanked. Thanked was the word used, not hired. He was told the selection would be finalized in the morning. He took Claire home. She had woken when the security team arrived and was now alert. Carrying Gordon, watching the uniformed people move through the corridor with the careful attention of a child who understands something significant is happening, but not its precise nature. In the elevator, she looked up at Raymond. Did something happen? Someone sent something they shouldn't have sent, he said, working on it. She took his hand. They rode the rest of the way down in quiet. He returned to the building at 8:15 that evening. There was a legitimate reason. A utilities vendor he'd been coordinating with, on a separate small contract, had scheduled a pickup for that evening at the building's service bay. A coincidence that had nothing to do with what he was actually there to do. He parked on level 2 of the structure and sat in the car for a moment after the engine cut. Claire was at home. He had called Mrs. Fowler, recovered enough now to sit with her for 2 hours. He had not told Claire where he was going. He had said he had an errand and would be back before her bedtime. He walked the parking structure, one circuit, noting the positions of all 8 cameras. On the second circuit, he stood in front of the camera on the eastern column of level 2 and looked at it for a long moment. The bracket had been adjusted. He could see it in the mounting angle relative to the cable run behind it, approximately 12 degrees off its original position. The adjustment created a blind zone that started at the elevator bank and extended 16 feet toward the stairwell. He stood in the blind zone and looked at it from inside. Then he called Priya Desai. He told her what he had found. She was quiet for a moment, and then said she would tell Judith. At 9:30, Judith crossed the lobby with Derek Ash beside her and took the elevator to level 2. Standard protocol was to vary the exit timing, but the 4:30 call had run long and the evening had compressed. Raymond was at the pillar near the elevator exit when the doors opened, arms folded, watching the far end of the row. Derek's hand moved before he processed who it was. His weight shifted. Raymond raised one open palm slowly and said quietly, "It's me." Derek exhaled, his hand lowered. "Eastern column, camera 3, Raymond said, adjusted on the bracket. Blind zone, 16 feet, starts at the elevator." Judith looked at him. "How long have you known?" "Since this afternoon." The gap in the service elevator log was 11 minutes. Too long for a drop and exit from street level. The camera had to have been adjusted earlier by someone with access to the structure. "I wanted to see the bracket myself before I said anything." She looked at him for a moment. "You came back on your own time." "I know." From the far end of the blind zone, 2 men came fast, dark clothing, moving with the specific directional purpose of people who have been told exactly where their target will be. Derek stepped forward and took the angle to the right. Raymond moved left and cut the second man's line before he'd covered half the distance. It was done in 9 seconds. Both men were on the ground, controlled, when building security came through the stairwell 40 seconds later. Judith had not moved from the wall. Raymond had placed her there in the first instant with one hand, and she had stayed exactly where he put her. When he came back, she was pressing her palms flat against the concrete behind her, the way a person confirms something solid is real. "You caught the camera in one walk," she said. Raymond did not answer. It was not a question. The access log came back the next morning. The camera on the eastern column of level 2 had been adjusted at 4:48 the previous afternoon, using a key card issued to a systems maintenance contractor added to the building's access roster 17 days earlier. The authorization for that addition had been signed by Preston Mallory. Priya Desai, who had the efficient instincts of someone who understood that a thread once found should be followed until it ends, looked further. It took her until midday. The contractor's payments, 4 of them over 6 weeks, came from a holding company incorporated in Nevada. The holding company listed the same registered agent as a private equity group that had made 2 acquisition offers for Harman Technologies. In the last 8 months, both declined. Preston Mallory had sat at the table for both negotiations. He was the only person outside Judith and the acquiring firm's principals who knew the terms of each rejected offer. There was also the call. 14 seconds, recorded through the firm's internal compliance system when the contractor's number triggered a monitoring flag for unusual pattern. Preston's voice and the contractor's voice confirming the camera adjustment and the timing of the package delivery. Priya flagged it to Judith's legal team. It was clean. It was enough. Judith scheduled the board session for 2 in the afternoon. Raymond was in the building that morning, in a small conference room off the main corridor, because Judith had asked him to be there, using the phrase interim security consultant in a way that acknowledged its imprecision. He sat against the wall while Preston Mallory walked the room through a professional and detailed review of the previous day's incident, identifying failure points in the lobby protocol and recommending enhancements to the access management system, speaking with the precise, authoritative cadence of a man who had thought carefully about every word he was going to say. Preston proposed at one point a new monitoring protocol for the parking structure cameras. He cited 2 industry frameworks. His reasoning was sound. It had no gaps. Raymond shook his head. It was a small movement, barely visible, a single slow lateral shift. Judith, seated at the head of the table with a direct sightline to the wall where Raymond sat, caught it. After the room cleared, she closed the door. She put a folder on the table, not the security review, the financial records. "Tell me what you saw." Raymond was quiet for a moment. He never looked at the board, he said. Every time someone asked about the incident, he watched the person asking. You do that when you already know the answer and you're reading the room, not learning from it. And when he got to the camera proposal, he had the framework citations ready before anyone raised the question. He knew that question was coming because he was the reason the question existed. Judith looked at the folder. He's been here 8 years. 8 years is a long time to be patient. The board session ran at 2:00. Judith laid the access logs and the contractor records and the payment trail and the call recording on the table in front of Preston Mallory in sequence, without commentary, the way a hand of cards is dealt when the game is already decided. Preston's composure held through the first document. It held through the second. By the third, it was still present but had gone static, the way a flame goes still when you take the air from it. He looked at the documents, then stopped looking at the documents and looked at Judith. This is circumstantial. The call recording isn't, she said. He said nothing. The board asked questions for 25 minutes. Preston answered some of them. He did not answer the fourth. His employment was suspended pending formal investigation by unanimous decision. Legal would handle the process from here. He was asked to leave his key card at the desk. Raymond stood outside the conference room door through all of it. He did not go in. He was not asked to. He stood with his back at an angle to the wall and his attention moving through the corridor at the same slow automatic pace it always moved, and he listened to the quality of the silence inside the room change as the session concluded. When Judith came out, she stood for a moment in the corridor, the way people stand when something they have been carrying for a long time has finally been set down. "Done," she said. He nodded. She looked at him. "You never told me what branch." "No." She waited. "Doesn't matter now," he said. She accepted this. She went back to her office, and Raymond went to find Claire, who was in the lobby with Priya, and had apparently spent the past hour drawing detailed architectural floor plans of the building from memory, which Priya had been watching with an expression she could not quite categorize. The lobby held the late afternoon light in the marble floor in long pale rectangles. Raymond came off the elevator with the canvas bag over one shoulder and found Claire and Priya already there. Claire had Gordon under one arm and was examining the grain of the marble floor with the systematic interest she applied to most surfaces she had not fully catalogued. Judith came down 7 minutes later, still in the blazer she had worn all day, carrying a white envelope. She crossed the lobby with the particular stride of a person who has calibrated exactly how fast she needs to move to get to a place on time. And when she reached Raymond, she stopped with a deliberateness slightly different from professional. She held out the envelope. He opened it. He read it in about 40 seconds, then slowed at the third page and read one section twice. The section that described the benefits package, full family coverage, effective on the first day of employment. He read it a third time. Then he took the pen from his shirt pocket and signed the last page and handed the envelope back. "When do I start?" "Monday," she said, 7 o'clock. 6:30. She looked at him. He looked at her. The lobby was very quiet and the pale light was very still, and neither of them looked away. 6:30, she said. Claire had been watching this exchange from beside Priya, with Gordon pressed under her chin, following the conversation the way she followed most things, without appearing to follow it. When Judith turned toward the door, Claire took 2 steps forward. "Excuse me." Judith stopped and looked down. "Are you going to be good to my dad?" Claire asked. She asked it the way 9-year-olds ask things, without softening, as a genuine inquiry. Judith crouched. Not a performance of crouching, not the pantomime of making yourself smaller for a child, but genuinely down so that she was at eye level with Claire, and the difference between them was nothing. "I think so," Judith said. "I'm going to try." Claire looked at her for a moment with the full, unguarded assessment children apply before they decide what they think of a person. Then she held Gordon out in both hands. "You can hold him for a minute," she said. "He helps when things feel too big." Judith took the elephant. He sat in her hand, small and soft and worn, his mismatched eyes looking up at her with their permanent mild astonishment. Her fingers closed around him slowly. Raymond had turned away. He was looking at the revolving door, at the city outside, at the ordinary motion of a Thursday afternoon that had continued without comment through all of it. His jaw moved once. He stood in the amber light of the lobby and did not let anyone see his face. Judith handed Gordon back with both hands, carefully, the way you return something that belongs to someone and has been trusted to you. "Thank you," she said. Claire took him and tucked him under her arm and looked at him for a moment with the satisfaction of someone whose assessment has been confirmed. Then she went to Raymond's side and took his hand. 6:30, Raymond said without turning around. 6:30, Judith said. They went out through the revolving door. Raymond and Claire and Gordon into the Thursday afternoon that was already going amber at the edges, already tipping toward evening, already becoming the next day, which would be the first one of something different. In the lobby behind them, Judith Harmon stood alone for a moment, with the lights settling on the marble floor and the revolving door still moving from their passage, and she did not move toward her own car for a little while. She was thinking about a 9-year-old who had spent 11 hours in a strange building, drawing the floor plan from memory, who had offered her stuffed elephant to a stranger, because the stranger looked like someone carrying something heavy. She was thinking about what it takes to raise a child like that, the kind of patience and steadiness and consistent presence it requires, day after day after day, with no audience and no record and no one keeping score. She was thinking that some things do not fit on a resume. Raymond Kowalski had known that too. He had walked into her building that morning with his daughter's hand in his and a canvas bag over his shoulder and a watch worth $19 and 11 years of work that could not be named in a room without clearance, and he had not once asked anyone to understand any of it. He had simply done the work and let it speak for itself. That was, she thought, a particular kind of strength. The quiet kind. The kind that does not need the room to be watching.